This segment is part of our Chasing the Dream initiative on poverty and opportunity in America. Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. Nicholas Kristof and Sheryl WuDunn have traveled the world to expose injustice and shed light on some of the most urgent and often neglected issues of our times. Now, the first husband and wife to share a Pulitzer Prize for journalism are turning their attention to America's own backyard and the great social depression unfolding right here at home. Their latest work, Tightrope: Americans Reaching for Hope, looks at the collapse of the country's working class, largely through the stories of some of the folks who Nick Kristof grew up with in Yamhill, Oregon. As it turns out, the community is a tragic microcosm of what's happening across the nation, where tens of millions of Americans are living lives of increasing despair and often dying far too young. In their new book, Kristof and WuDunn explore the political, social, and economic problems behind this disturbing trend, while also offering solutions. Their search for answers is also the subject of a new documentary, and here's a look.
One of my most powerful memories from childhood is the number 6 school bus. But this memory is also tinged with sadness, because today, about a quarter of the kids who rode that bus with me are no longer alive.
We want to understand how so many people fell through the cracks and what can be done to change things.
I'm not rich. I have 2 roommates. I don't own my house. I barely own a running car. But there needs to be people that are willing to say, hey, let me help you.
I think it takes a village for someone to succeed. If it wasn't for the support, I don't think I would have just done it.
Whether or not there will be opportunity for everyone, that's the question that we're facing right now as a nation.
So it's time for a new version of the American dream, one that includes everybody.
And joining us now are Nicholas Kristof and Sheryl WuDunn. Welcome, both of you. It's a pleasure to have you back on the program.
Good to be with you, Raph.
Now, let's start with you, Nick. Your book is essentially, as I explained it, a ground-level account of what you've aptly called America's great social depression. It's a devastating reality that affects millions and millions of Americans, but it's still largely uncovered by the media. Elaborate. Tell us why you decided to cover this issue.
Well, Sheryl and I were traveling around the world and covering global humanitarian crises and periodically returning to my beloved hometown of Yamhill, where my mom still lives on the farm that I grew up on. And we'd see my friends, and gradually we realized that there was a humanitarian crisis unfolding right in my hometown. And I'm close to the kids who were on my old school bus, the number 6 school bus. And of those kids, about a quarter have died of drugs, alcohol, reckless accidents, suicide. And Sheryl and I realized that this wasn't just one town's crisis, however near and dear that it was to us. This was a problem across working class America. And there was so much commonality between what was happening, the kids on my bus, and what was happening in coal country in Kentucky, or timber country in northern Maine, or cities in Arkansas and Baltimore, and that this is not getting attention. And it was kind of frustrating for us to see the political debate. Look, President Trump obviously dominated. We're a very polarized country. The discussion is about President Trump. It's enormously important what happens to this presidency, but these issues predated President Trump. They will be around when he is gone. To some degree, these problems helped elect him, and I don't know that the country as a whole, or that we in the media, are doing an adequate job highlighting these underlying problems.
I'll be bold. I'll say no, we're not. We're not. Very few people are. So Sheryl, let me ask you, elaborate on that. Why is it that we're not? Recently I was talking to Nick earlier, and I interviewed Edward Danticat, a Haitian-American writer, great Haitian-American writer, and I asked her a few years ago, why is it that the story of the 250,000 Haitians that died in the earthquake was absent so quickly from the headlines? And she said it was because people expect that that's the kind of thing that happens to those people over there. I wonder if that's playing into the non-coverage of this devastation.
Well, first of all, I think that the news industry itself is built on events. And so what makes news basically is events, things that explode that out of the ordinary. So that tends to be bad news. And so we tend to cover event-driven bad news. This kind of underpinning that we are seeing throughout the country is not something that happened just one day. You don't just get to 72,000 deaths from opioids in one day. It takes decades, and so it's sort of incremental building, and that's hard for the news media to cover, except through features and longer form journalism. And that's actually, a good showcase for it. There just hasn't been enough coverage of it. People need to say, wait a second, what's going on here with average and ordinary Americans? Starting with the question is, why did they vote for Trump? That should have been a signal. Let's actually delve more deeply. Let's just not just go into the diner and just talk to them for an hour. What allowed us to really understand more about this society is that we had long-standing relationships with a lot of Nick's old friends, and so they welcomed us into their homes, and we were able to talk to them and get to know really what was going on. I mean, what's surprising is that we knew some, for instance, Clayton. Clayton works
one of the people you feature.
Exactly.
Yeah. Friend of yours from your
and Clayton works at the farm where Nick's mom lives, and so we would see him all the time. We would chat and everything like that. But when we really started to talk to him, and he brought us into his home, that's when we learned so much more that we didn't know anything about. These are Americans who you will see on a daily basis, and they put a smile on their face, but you just don't know what's going on at home.
I must say, we owe so much to those people who were willing to talk to us, frankly, for the book. And they, there's a debate in this country about the degree to which personal responsibility is the issue.
Sure.
And
that's my next question, because I think that probably most of the people who are learning about this without having experienced it would say, hey, it's a problem of personal irresponsibility, right?
Yeah, and I think we need to, I think we have a narrative problem in this country. And look, there is no doubt that people like, frankly, Clayton exhibited some irresponsibility and made self-destructive choices, and Clayton would have acknowledged that. But we also have to see that kids are often propelled on a trajectory that is going to lead them toward irresponsible decisions. Yeah. And, if you are raised in a deeply troubled household and don't get support and go to a school and then maybe get kicked, Clayton was kicked out of school in the 9th grade. What is somebody who's been kicked out of the school in the 9th grade supposed to do? Clayton was immensely talented, and he never studied, he never had a chance to study chemistry. He turned out to be a first-rate chemist. He ended up cooking meth in the area, being one of the first people in the Yamhill area to cook meth. And, that was a terribly destructive thing to do for Yamhill. But if the school system had kept him in, if he'd been a graduate, if he'd had better jobs available the way his dad had, then the result would be much better for Clayton and for the community.
And that is what makes it so even more tragic. Not only that Clayton and his kids and his grandkids, because it's generational now, are living these lives of desperation. It's that their parents didn't. His parents were working class people who had opportunities and were moving up.
Well, and that's where the structure of society comes in. So at that time, within their small circle, in their society, there were jobs available. There were manufacturing jobs. There were working class jobs, really good jobs that paid enough so that you actually could survive and raise a family on it. We don't have that. That social structure is falling apart. They also had churches. You had institutions, community institutions that really helped people, came together. That's all falling apart. And so one man can't, survive alone as an island. We really are part of a larger society. And so that's where the social responsibility part comes in as well. I mean, when it gets to the point where you can predict, in many cases, what the future of a child would be based on the zip code that he or she was born in, we know that it's not just that infant's fault.
Of course. But how did we get here? What were the mistakes that our political leaders and elites made? And when did they start making them?
So if you look at the stats, then essentially things began to go downhill in the 1970s. And that's when high school graduation rates stagnate. That's when mass incarceration begins, which in turn leads to the destruction of families. That's when wages, especially for the working class, stagnate and actually decline. And so, for example, the federal minimum wage in 1968, if it had kept up with inflation and with productivity, it would now be $22 an hour. Now, families would be in much better shape, and kids would be if that was the prevailing federal minimum wage. And we also, I'd say, had the collapse of labor unions, especially private sector labor unions, which I think is an element of that, coupled with this change of the narrative so that we began to be less looking for ways to support people and more pointing fingers rather than offering helping hands. You know, I've got to say, so in Oregon, you know, I grew very much up with the idea of the pioneer ethos, and, you know, our state was peopled by risk takers who crossed the country, who pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. And one of the things that I think Cheryl and I saw in writing Tightrope was, yes, those were incredibly brave, courageous people showing tremendous initiative, but they were responding to a government program.
Right.
They were going because of the chance to get homesteads. And once they got out to Oregon, they would get 640 acres. Later, and the Homestead Act transformed people by giving opportunity to these risk takers. Later, rural electrification transformed the landscape. The GI Bill of Rights let people get an education and get their homes. So even in these periods that we acclaim as the...
Yeah, even when we think, you know, we did it on our own, we did not do it on our own.
Not.
But look, one thing that working class Americans did have for a long time, at least when you read the history books, they had a party that tended to support their interest. You had a Democratic Party that was a working class party that saw them as constituents rather than as irredeemable deplorables. When did that change happen? And by the way, it's not something that's just happening here. As we saw in the British elections, the Labour Party abandoned the working class abandoned the Labour Party. It's happening in Italy, it's happening in Spain. But why did it happen here?
I think a lot of it is that there's just been a gradual sort of disappearance of the voice of people in the working class. I mean, they start to lose their jobs. I mean, certainly globalization did play a role. Look, with globalization, all Americans benefit because we have cheaper products when manufacturing moves overseas. At the same time, we did lose jobs. And so these communities, like in Yamhill, Oregon, when the glove factory shut down and moved to Costa Rica, there were no other alternatives. And so
but it moved to Costa Rica, it moved to Mexico, it moved to China because of policy supported by the Democratic Party. So, I mean, and obviously from your book, you can see that those constituents are still there.
Right.
Why were they abandoned?
Well, it's a matter of jobs versus, general welfare. Everybody paid less for the cheaper products overseas. So there was, consumer welfare. But at the same time, the specific jobs for that location were lost. And so what happened is that I think that there has been an alienation. I think that both parties have just lost touch with the average Americans. And it is a little bit funny that now the Republicans seem to have garnered the support from working class Americans when traditionally it has been the Democratic Party. I just think that both parties have just forgotten these people. And also these people, if you're struggling with a drug addiction or an alcoholic problem, you're less likely to vote, you're less likely to have a voice or give voice, and so you are easily forgotten.
I would add that there's also historically in the U.S. been a tension between the white working class and the black working class, and you had people like Bobby Kennedy who tried very, very hard to bridge that and to get the working class of every race to cooperate for policies that would make a difference. But that didn't really happen, and Richard Nixon really made a pursued a strategy of pitting the two against each other and aiming for the South and for the white working class.
The so-called Southern strategy.
The Southern strategy. And using African Americans as a scapegoat and as a way to solicit votes from those whites who felt threatened. And I think that worked reasonably well. It meant that a lot of working class whites then became Republicans, not because of economic issues, but because of issues related to race, later LGBT issue, gay marriage, religion, guns, these various
all these divided
cultural
people.
issues.
But it seems to me that there's, even on the progressive left, they're exacerbating that, except with the so-called identity politics, dividing people. I remember speaking to an author of a book that was talking about the resurgence of the labor movement. This was before the election, before the Trump's election. And I said, having been in the labor movement for 10 years, what about those? Are you concerned that the white working class and the Rust Belt may abandon this strategy? And oblivious to it.
Yeah.
That wasn't important. No, of course not. But it did.
Yeah. And and certainly in the presidential campaign, you hear a lot of talk about middle class issues. There's a lot of talk about college access. There's nobody is really talking about the fact that 1 in 7 American kids doesn't graduate from high school. The working class is not mentioned. What would have made a difference for the kids that we write about in Tightrope? It would have been, early childhood education programs.
So let's talk about that. Let's break it down, because you dedicate a whole chapter to the policy steps that need to be taken. Tell us what some of those are.
Yes, one of the most important policy steps we believe in is early childhood education. And that's really important because, as I mentioned earlier with the zip codes, infants born in a certain zip code, what can they do? It's not their fault because they're born in a certain zip code. But if they are born with drugs in their system, first of all, then obviously you need a hospital that's going to make sure that they try and get the drugs out of the infant's system, and then have a certain kind of care system that tries to get them out of that state. In other words, early childhood education. And I have seen remarkable programs. I mean, it is not rocket science. It actually is something that can be turned around. We just need the political will to devote the resources to have them all over the country. So we went to visit this Circle preschool, which was remarkable. They specialize in actually troubled infants, kids who have drugs in their system. And I went there and I visited a family whose the little boy had been born in that situation, and the two parents were just too addicted to drugs, and so they couldn't take care of the infant. So the uncle actually did, and uncle and aunt, and they found this Circle Pre-K, and the woman, Kathy Ryan, there knows how to work with kids to soften their anger, to actually let them act out a little bit so that they actually can get it out of their system. Within 7 to 8 months, this kid was an almost normal kid. He still had a temper, but he was able to laugh and play and
this is a model that could serve
exactly.
We replicated across the country.
And we need these everywhere, because she was saying, yes, we're trying to build a model that we actually can, a template that we actually can send around the country.
What else? What's some of the other things that need to be done? That must be done?
Well, drug rehabilitation. So, for instance, we incarcerate a lot of small-time drug users. All right, some of this is changing, but over 20 years, since 1986, in fact, when we had the war on drugs and the two laws that actually said, okay, now we have to throw even small-time drug users in jail. Well, you not only break up families when you do that, but also you're putting people in jail who don't belong there. They really belong, like, in rehab if they have a drug addiction. So we visited a program in Oklahoma where instead of these women who, yes, they've committed crimes. They've committed crimes, but mainly because they're addicted to drugs and they needed to get some money to pay for their addiction. So instead of sending them to prison, what they do is they say, okay, if this person qualifies, then let's send them to drug rehabilitation. And of course, this is paid by private philanthropy, but it is a miraculous program. Within 2 years, they graduate from the program, and they actually are given business skills so they can get a job. They're actually given internships and all sorts of retraining, retooling. I mean, they're actually taught things like morality. What are good morals? In other words, why, instead of stealing that $100, you have to work 4 hours for it, but it's better than stealing. So there's a lot of really good work that's being done, but it needs to be widespread and not just paid for by private philanthropy.
How about education? How about universal health care? What are some of the things concretely realistically
Yeah.
can be accomplished in those areas?
Well, so, I mean, the U.S. is just about the only advanced country that does not have universal health insurance of some kind. And, you know, this has to include not just healthcare, but dental care. We watched as somebody had 18 teeth pulled, 18 teeth, you know, in one time because he hadn't seen a dentist in 20 years.
These are Americans.
Yeah.
That story that you tell is doctors have to go as if they were, let's face it, in some third world country, and Americans line up to get their teeth taken care of, and some of them, of course, have to lose all their teeth because they haven't been taken care of.
That's right.
It's also because Medicaid does not include dental and vision.
It's a
And so our system is really chaotic. And so for this one day, and this excellent remote area medical, they have this program where they go to lots of different cities, and it's unbelievable. They're up to like 70, 80 cities in America for people who need free access to health care. And these people line up overnight because they want to get a spot and make sure that they can get their teeth treated.
You know, in the U.S., there are at least 3 counties that have a shorter life expectancy here in the U.S., in the richest country in the history of the world, than do either Cambodia or Bangladesh. And that is scandalous.
And often
we
it's-
know how to address that.
And often within the same city, in Philadelphia, for instance, if you take one area, one district and another district, the life expectancy difference is 20 years.
And of course, you mentioned this, and we've read this before. The cost of not doing these things, the cost of letting the status quo continue is much more expensive than in the investments that would stop these things. But both parties, there are elements in both parties now. You can hear them. Both in the Republican Party, there's the real populist Republicans and, of course, the real populist Democrats are beginning to talk about this. But can they come together to deal with these issues in this very toxic political atmosphere?
We think there is one area that they actually can at least begin, and that's early childhood. And because actually the red states are doing a really good job of early childhood education, and they, in some cases, those places are a role model for other cities and other states in America. And we just have to acknowledge that whoever has the best program, let's actually use that as a model and let's replicate it throughout the country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say we're also getting more humane drug treatment policies now that this is becoming much more of a white issue. I mean, and there's an element of hypocrisy and double standards there, but if belatedly now, because a lot of whites in Ohio are suffering from addiction, if that can lead to better policies and to treatment instead of incarceration, then we as a country will be better off,
as I
and
said,
it'll pay for itself.
You guys have covered stories, devastating stories, very terrible stories. But here is, going back to the beginning of the conversation, this is in your own backyard. These are people that you know. How much more difficult was it to cover this story when it's so personal?
Oh, Raf, it is so much harder. I've spent a lot of time in distant refugee camps and getting stories, and then I have this professional armor. I have this protection. And there was a girl I had a crush on in the 7th grade, and she, Mary Mayer, was very brave in telling us her story. And she's smart, she's talented, and she ended up with alcohol and drug abuse, ended up homeless for 7 years. And she was deeply embarrassed about this, but she wanted to share her story so that people would understand what it's like to go through this. And so, we're so grateful to people like Mary, but it's a lot tougher emotionally to write about your beloved hometown. And we hope that in turn, this will cast a spotlight on some of these issues and lead to better policies.
Well, we can all hope that, and I know you guys are always hopeful in everything that you write. In fact, the subtitle is Americans Reaching for Hope, and if people read this book, I think that maybe we'll make some strides. Nick,
We hope
Cheryl,
so. Thank you.
Thank you very
so much
Raf.
for joining us today.